The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. I see another person signing in right now, so just want to give them a moment so they can get caught up. Okay, looks like everyone is signed in right now. Well, we have a lot of material to cover in the hour, so I'd like to begin. This is the Intermediate Report Designer Training Webinar, formerly known as AutoTag, now Report Designer. Today is Wednesday, October 17th, 2018. My name is Eric Johnson, and I will be your Windward training facilitator today. I'm a technical support engineer here at Windward Studios. I've been here a little over a year now. Maybe you've interacted with me already through help desk tickets. Well, welcome everyone. You may have noticed that when you logged into the GoToMeeting webinar, you have a toolbar. The arrow that you see on the screen is pointing to the raise your hand icon. So if anytime during the webinar you have a question or are experiencing technical difficulties, please feel free to click that button to ask your question or notify me of anything that's wrong. The prompts I have for questions and chat are on my other screen, so I may not see your questions immediately. Usually I wait until the Q&A session at the end to answer your questions, but I'll look now and again to see if anything has been raised. Again, this is the Intermediate Report Designer Training Webinar. We're assuming that you've built some templates. They could have been very simple templates. We're assuming that you've installed Report Designer, that you know how to use tags, that you know how to connect to your data sources. You know enough about Report Designer to get you started. And you may have joined us last week for the basic Report Designer training. To give you an idea of the kind of machine I'm working on today, I'm using Windows 10 operating system, which is 64-bit. I'm also using Office 2016, 64-bit. And the version of Report Designer that I'm using is 15.2.402.0. You can always find the latest versions of Report Designer on our downloads page, and we will soon be officially releasing version 16 in the next couple of weeks. We have released it already as a release candidate, and we've had some good feedback on that, and we're going to be releasing 16 shortly, officially. Okay, I want to give you a high-level overview of what we'll be discussing today. I'll go over some advanced features for the for each tag. We'll discuss conditional formatting, covering two types of conditional formatting. One, where we're showing and hiding content using Report Designer tags. And a second type that formats output based on conditions. We'll go over the equation editor, where I'll show you how to add the sum function to a template. We'll discuss the if and switch tags and what the differences are. I'll show you an example of the import tag, and of course, the Q&A session is at the very end. So, for the for each tag, let's review what it actually does. And it does three things. First, it grabs a set of data. any set of data that you want to pull from your data source. Second, it loops through that set of data that you selected to work with. And third, it repeats all the elements between the tags. For today, I'll show you the importance of where to place the beginning and ending for each tags, and show you the results of placing these tags in different ways. We'll also get into grouping data or nesting for each tags, and I'll show you how to group your data with nested for each tags. Okay, we're now going to move away from the PowerPoint presentation, and let's get into a Word document. Just opening up a blank one right now. Okay, so when you install Report Designer, you get the Samples button, which can be accessed through Auto Tag or the Auto Tag Manager tab. And when you click on that, it opens our Getting Started guide. And for today, we're going to focus down here in this Samples Templates section under the Additional subsection. There's the Tag Tutorials SQL. And this is where we're going to focus on today. We also have tutorials for XML, as these are the second greatest used, and JSON the third, but we just don't have the tutorials yet for JSON. So we're going to start this webinar by focusing on the for each sample. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that right now to open for each sample template. And we're going to look at this first sample right here, a for each tag without a table. It is possible to use the for each tag without a table. Yes, yes it is, as you can see from this sample right here. And below this is a for each tag with a table, which you may be familiar with. But I want to point out a couple of things here in this example. First thing is where you place the beginning and ending for each tags, and second, why the placement is important when you loop through your data. But before we do anything else, let's go ahead and select this for each tag and preview the data so we can see what we're working with. And here, this for each tag is just returning the category ID, category name, description, and picture from the categories table. Okay, now what is this alt tag next to this for each tag returning? Let's select that, click preview. All right, and here this alt tag, we're just pulling the category ID from the categories table, 1 through 8 we have listed here. And now what's this second alt tag doing? Select it, click preview. Okay, and this alt tag is just pulling the category names from the categories table. Here's beverages, condiments, confections. We've seen this stuff in our last webinar. And then we have our end for each tag right here, just below for each and alt tags. So let's show you what the output is going to look like. Click output. Okay, I'm going to split the screen. And over here on the left is our template, and over here on the right is our output. And you'll notice that we're just showing here in the output the category ID, a dash, and the category name. And each one of these categories are ending up on a separate line. So how is this actually happen? Why is it inserting the next record on the next line? Well, let's go back to the template. And the reason why it's doing this is because we added the end for each on the very next line after the alt tag. So there's nothing after this alt tag, all this white space. Then the ending for each tag is on the next line. So you can see more clearly what's happening. I'm going to go to the Home tab. I'm going to turn on Show Hide Formatting. So right after this last alt tag is this paragraph marker. So we're providing a carriage return after these alt tags so we can add our end for each tag just below it. Now what happens if we take away this carriage return? Let's remove it and place the end for each tag right after the final alt tag. What will our output look like now? Close the previous one. And let's go ahead and generate new output. Okay, split the screen again. Okay, here we go. Now our output looks very different. Immediately after the first record, it starts the second record. There isn't even a space between beverages and the number 2. You can see this in the template. After the alt tag is our end for each tag. This is telling Report Designer to go back and display the next category ID dash and category name right next to the previous record, as we see here, and then so on and so on. And it will do this across the page until it reaches the right margin. And then it goes on to the next line and carries on with the list. Oh, I see something, not able to see the screen. Uh-oh. Sorry about that. Okay, I think that should now be showing you. Let's see, I think yep, it's now should be showing you. Sorry about that, I'm not sure what happened there. Let me back this up a little. Let's close this out. So let me just undo the changes. Okay, now that you can see the screen. So with the carriage return here, when I generate output, you can see that we have the category ID, a dash, and then the beverages. Carriage return is the next thing that's displayed after the second alt tag, which brings us down to the next line, where this end for each is saying go back and start over again with the next category ID, dash, and category name. Now, when we remove this alt tag, you can see now that these records are lining up one after the other on the same line. And that's because everything between the beginning and ending for each tags is processed through each loop. And earlier we had a page of a carriage return, which we have removed. And now with the removal, it puts it right next to each other because there is no carriage return. So this is why it's important where you place the end for each tag. Everything between this beginning and ending for each tags are repeated. Right now, no carriage return, but when there was, that was repeated with each loop. Okay, before we move on, I'd like to point out the tag tree button, which is in the auto tag tab over here in the data section, tag tree. So I'm going to go ahead and click this. And this is very helpful, especially when you're reviewing templates that you haven't seen before. It lets me know all the tags that are in the template. So I'm going to expand this main story. And main story is just for the main document. If I add tags within the header or the footer, these would display separately from the main story. You would see header and footer. But since we only have tags in the main portion of the document, we're only seeing them listed here under the main story. But I like to focus on this last for each loop. Right here, this customers loop. Another thing that the tag tree does that's helpful is when you are trying to locate one of these tags, if you double click the tag, it'll bring you directly to where that tag is in the template. So I just clicked on this customer loop and it brought me all the way down here to the very end, so that customers loop tag. Okay, now I'm just going to expand this customer loop a little further and just want to discuss its makeup. So here we have our outer for each loop, which is the customers loop. And then we have an inner for each loop connected to this outer for each loop. And this is where we'll talk about grouping. And then we also have within this, we start off with the outer customer loop, then we have a company name alt tag. Here's our inner loop with its alt tag and its ending for each tag. This ending for each tag relates to this inner for each loop. And then lastly, we have another end for each tag, which relates to this outer customers loop. Now, just below this is this tag properties section. And unfortunately, during the webinar, this section does not display for some reason. But usually, and I checked this earlier, this gives you a snapshot of the properties and the queries that relate to the tag. So you could come in here and see the query, switch it to the properties, and then update the tag through this section here. It's just a quick snapshot, and we'll see a more robust version of this in a few moments. But back to the sample here. So what is going on? We have this outer for each loop set up through this for each tag, and we want to group some data based on the company name. So let's go ahead and preview this customer loop and see the data it's returning. And here it just seems to be returning 4 records, a bunch of customer IDs that start with the letter A, and we're also getting the company name. Okay, next thing between this beginning and ending for each tag is our company name alt tag. Let's preview it to see what it's returning. And here, as it says, we're just returning the company name. A bunch of them, 4 of them. Okay, next is another for each tag, and this is our inner for each tag right here. So let's preview this inner for each tag to see what it's returning. And it seems to be returning all of the orders that pertain to a specific customer ID. So let's say you have a list of company names that you want to see all their orders for as it goes through the list. So this is exactly what we're doing here in this sample. We're displaying all the orders for the company. And this inner for each loop is also getting a lot of other information as well. So let's look at this alt tag to see what it's going to be displaying. And it's just going to show the order ID. So even though this inner for each loop was bringing back a lot more information, we're only just going to be displaying the order ID. So now let's take a look at how this will output. Split the screen. I'm going to close the tag tree. And let's scroll all the way down to the grouping, to our grouping for each tag sample that we've been looking at right here. So we have our loop right here in our template. And over here on the right, you can see the results of this loop. We have the number 1, the company name, and all the orders that pertain to this company name. Then it iterates to the next company record and displays its orders, and so on to the next company and the next company, displaying each one of their orders. So now let's look at this number 1 in the list, and you can see how it's repeating number 1 for each one of these companies. And this is where we're grouping orders under specific company names. So let's go ahead and take a look at this a little closer. I'm going to close the output. So how do we tie this inner for each loop right here to this customer outer for each loop? So I'm going to select the outer for each tag right here, this customer loop. I want to point out that this customer loop for each tag has a variable name of var name 10. And again, variable is just what Report Designer uses to identify this for each loop. Now let's go ahead and select this inner for each tag, and come up here and click on the Wizard button. Okay, and this opens up our SQL Wizard. And here we have all the columns that we're pulling in for this inner for each loop right here. I'm going to minimize this as it's not going to be the focal point of what we're going to be discussing. So how do we tie this inner for each tag with this outer for each tag? And we do that through this filter section. And you can see it's already been set up for us. So what we're doing is we're collecting the customer ID from the orders table. And you can see this right here. And we're setting that equal to the value of var name 10. And if you remember, var name 10 is just the variable name of our customer loop. And we're having that equal to the customer ID of var name 10 loop. So having the customer ID from the orders table equal to the customer ID from the var name 10, we can utilize these similar keys and connect it to the outer loop, which is right here. Now, if I click on this var name 10 customer ID and then click on the drop down, I'm going to expand the var name 10. So this is the var name 10 loop with all the things I can connect to. And earlier we saw that the var name 10 had the customer ID and company name. We're going to be connecting to the customer ID. So I'm going to go in and select that. And you'll notice over here on the right in our data preview pane that there's this first customer ID, the ALFKI, and all the orders that pertain to that specific customer ID. So this is how you connect your inner for each loop, this orders.customer ID, to the outer for each loop, this var name 10.customer ID. Okay. So I want to go ahead and generate another output right now. Now that we just showed, explain to you how grouping is working. Let's scroll down. And this time I just want to explain what is actually happening when we generate output with the engine. And each report designer has a small .NET engine built into it. So what actually happening is our engine is completely stripping out the data from your template, collecting that data, and then rebuilding from scratch, from top down, everything that's in your template. It shows the data that you wanted and displays it how you formatted it within your template. So what's happening here in our example is that Report Designer collects all the data from this customers loop and all the data within this inner for each loop, ties it together, and then when it produces the output, it says, okay, what's after this customer loop? And the first thing that that comes to is this numbered list and the company name. Then what does it do? It sees this inner for each loop. So it grabs that data and displays the out tag for this inner loop. It will do this for all the order IDs that pertain to this specific company name. It will loop through showing everything between this beginning and ending for each loop. Then when it's done with the order IDs for that customer, it goes on to the next line where it comes across this ending for each loop. And this tells the engine to go back to the beginning of the outer loop, collect the next record, and repeat the process. Iterate through the loop, repeating the process for every company name that's listed and displaying all its orders, as you can see here. So this gives you an idea of how the engine is tearing down your template and rebuilding it from scratch after pulling all your data from your data source. So this is how you group your data using nested for each loops. I'm going to go ahead and close this output now. And next thing I'd like to go over before leaving the sample is on this page above. The nested for each loop sample. So we've been creating for each tags using row-based formatting. We're now going to focus on how to create for each tags using column-based formatting. As you see right here, the for each tag can be used for column major expansion. Now, let me show you how to do this. So there's three things that are different when you want to create columns instead of rows. And this example above is typical when you want to create row-based columns. So we have our for each tag, all our out tags for the specific columns, and then we have our end for each tag outside of the table. And this is typically what you want to do. But in this next example, this column-based expansion sample, the end for each tag is inside the table. And this is the first thing that I want to point out when setting up for column-based formatting. So let's go ahead and preview the for each tag right here, just to see what it's returning. And here it's just returning category ID, category name, description, and picture. We're pretty familiar with this results by now. Okay, now what is this out tag displaying? Let's select it and preview it. And here it's just only displaying the category name, beverages, condiments, so on. So instead of creating a list top down of the category names, we're going to create columns left to right across the page. So let's take a look at the output just so we can see what it looks like. Okay, split the screen. All right, here we are right here. Here's our example. So instead of going top down as we create this table, we're going left to right, expanding the table, creating new columns based on the records that were retrieved from the for each tag. Okay, and back to the template for a moment. So typically when you place this N for each tag within a table, it should create a blank row right here at the end of our list of category names. But we're not seeing that blank row right here in our output. Now, let me show you why that's happening. So there's a couple of ways to edit a tag. You can either double click on a tag, or you can click on the edit button, which is located here in the auto tag tab. So I'm going to go ahead and select this N for each tag and click on this edit tag button. So the N for each tag is not used to query anything. It's just used to tell Report Designer when to stop looping through the data and repeating the elements. That's why you see no query listed here. But within the Properties tab, there's this Delete Row attribute. And this attribute is currently set to true. And this is why we're not showing the last blank row, because we have Delete Row set to true, where it will suppress this row on output. Now, if I was to turn this off or change it to false by double clicking it, saving this, what's our output going to look like now? I'll scroll down to the example. All right, so as you can see, we now have that blank final row as we put the N for each tag here in the table, and we set that delete row to false. So with this N for each tag in the table, we normally see that. Okay, so that's the second thing for row-based, column-based expansion, is to set the delete row attribute to true. Now, the last thing that you need to do for column-based expansion is to change the property value for the for each tag to create columns instead of rows. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this for each tag, double click it to open up our tag editor. Now this window is more robust than the properties tab that you would have seen in the tag editor. Here, you have a preview button, and if I click on this, you can see the results that's being returned. Here, category, the category name, description, and picture. Next, there's a wizard button, just like the button in the auto tag tab to see my SQL Wizard. Then there's the equation button, which I'll show you a little later, that adds an equation for the tag. Then there's the next and previous buttons, which take you to the respective tags without actually exiting the tag editor. And over here on the left, just like our data bin, these are all the tables, views, and stored procedures I have access to. On the right, over here is our query window. And your query window is probably white. If you right-click within the window, there's this color scheme option, and I'm using base 16 ocean dark. What is normal is this plain option right here. Okay, now if I click this properties tab, this is where we set our column-based expansion. Here we have a few different properties, some advanced properties that you can set for each tag. Also got some other standard ones. But down here in the tag section, you'll notice that our order attribute is set to column. Now, if I click on this drop down to see the different choices we have, there's legacy, and legacy is what is used by default. Legacy isn't much different than row. It's just the original way that we built the tag. The row attribute does a little more. If you want to delete a row with a n for each, you'll have to use this option over the legacy. In our wiki page, there's more information on how legacy is different from row. But since we're expanding not by rows, but by columns, we'll want columns set for order. Now with column selected, I'm going to save the tag. And you can see here, this is what the output with column-based expansion is looking like. So let's go ahead and change this back. I'm going to go ahead and double-click this N for each tag. Double-click it. Go to the Properties tab and change the delete row back to true. Save the output. And now when we create new output, since we set that delete row back to true, we should not see that blank row here. So 3 things for setting up column-based expansion. First thing is to make sure that your for each tag is set to column, that your n for each tag is within the table, and the delete row attribute of this n for each tag is set to true. All right, let's go back to our slides for a moment. Okay, so we talked about legacy, row, column types for the for each tag. We talked about the delete row attribute, which deletes the row where the n for each tag is placed. All right, the equation editor. So we have over 50 equations or functions available for you to use. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of those. I'm gonna go back to our for each tag. Let's click on the samples button. Actually, no, so I already have a template that I started with. Slide it over here. So this template we're going to use now is there's going to be a template that we're going to set up a sum function so that we can total all the sales amount from all our salespeople. So this table right here, let's go ahead and discuss it a little bit. It's a normal table that we've used to seeing, not a column based, but more row based, where we have our for each loop, alt tag for the salesperson, alt tag for the number of calls, alt tag for the leads generated, and alt tag for our sales amount. And then our end for each tag is here outside the table. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the data that's within this sales loop. So I'm going to select it, go to the auto tag tab, and click preview. And so this looks like it's just returning the same things that we're showing on the alt tag: salespeople, number of calls, call nums, leads generated, and sales amount. All right, before we actually add the sum function to this template, I want to show you how to conditionally format text so that any salesperson not meeting their quota will have their sales amount displayed in red text. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on this sales amount alt tag to open our tag editor. And this var name one is just the variable name for our sales loop. I'm going to click on the properties tab. And in this tag section, you'll notice that there's a condition already set up for us. I'm going to go ahead and click on this ellipsis here at the end of the line. And this opens up our conditional formatting rule manager. So whenever you add an equation or whenever you want to evaluate data, you want to begin with an equal sign, which is done here for us. Then we're going to look at the sales loop, which is this var name one, and we're going to specifically look at the sales amount. And we're checking if that sales amount is less than 8,000. Okay, now that you can see that our equation is built for us, how do we format that? How do we format that in a certain way? Well, if I knew the formatting code, I could enter it right here in this field, or I can click on this wizard button, and this opens up our format options. Here, we can format the text by italicizing it, bolding it, underlining it. We can change the text color of the background. And since we're working with tables, you'll also see this cell tab right here, where we can change the line styles, the line color, cell color, or even the alignment. Back to the text tag, because all we want to do now is just change the text to a color red. And we've already have this set up right here in our example here. So here we have text color FF0000. And this is the hex code for the color red. Unfortunately, we don't have a color palette at this time. That's something we want to add as an option. But for now, if you want to change the text color, you would just have to enter in the hex code here. Since we want this to be red, we have this entered, exactly what we want. So when I click OK here, you can see the format set up for us where the color will change to red. And we can also add another rule if we wanted to. We could delete a rule. But since this is all we want to do, show red text for those sales amount that is less than 8,000, I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Save the tag. Now generate output. I'm going to turn off this show high formatting. It's not needed anymore. So you can see here, any sales amount that is less than $8,000 is now displayed in red. And those amounts over $8,000 is the typical black font. So here, this is just one way to conditionally format an alt tag for output. All right, now let's go ahead and add a sum function to this table. So how do we do that? So we need to create a new row in our table underneath this row right here. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this end for each tag, and I'm going to add a new row. That's by clicking on that button. So we're now going to do what I told you not to do earlier when it comes to row-based templates, and this is row-based templates, as we're going to create a table top-down. And what we're going to do now is add the end for each tag inside the table. So I'll place my cursor here, go up here to tags, and add the end for each tag inside the table. Now, let's go ahead and give a label to what we want to display now. We want to put the total sales amount, so let's go ahead and give this a label. Let's go ahead and bold this, format it a little bit, and let's right align it. Okay, now I'm going to add an alt tag next to this total label under our sales amount so we can display the total sales amount. Come up to the auto tag tab, click tags, and add an alt tag. With this added, I want to go ahead and double click it to open up our tag editor. And this time I'm going to click on the equation button. And this opens up our insert function window. And here we can select, we have all the categories listed, but we do give you a way to limit the functions. We have date and time, math and trig, statistical, database, text, logical. I'm going to go ahead and click on the math and trig as we're looking for the sum function. I'll scroll down as this is in alphabetical order. And here's our sum function right here. So when I select the sum function, down here you can see a short description of it. It adds all the numbers and a range of values, and that's exactly what we're looking for. So I'm going to click OK. And this opens up a function arguments window. And here's our equation, which always starts with an equal sign to evaluate. And it has done it for us right here. Then here's our sum function and nothing between these parentheses. So now let's add to this equation what we're actually going to sum up. And if we knew what we wanted to sum up, we could enter that value right here in the number 1 field. Or we can click on this wizard button and it opens up our SQL Wizard. So it spans tables, it spans sales because that's the tables, that's the table that we're working on is the sales table. So we want to take all the sales amounts and total it up. And you do that by selecting the sales amount and then dragging it to this column section right here. Now over here in the data preview pane, we see all our sales amounts, exactly what we want to sum up. So that's all you need to do is just drag the sales amount into the column section. So with that done, our sales amount, we don't click OK. And you'll notice now to the right of this number 1 field, we have our first value that's being returned. And down here, there's also even the grand total. not formulated, not formatted, but it is here. And now our sum function has data in it. So we're selecting the sales amount from the sales table. And that's exactly what we want to see. So if that's equation set up, click OK. And you'll notice here our query that we built through the equation editor right here in the query tab. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And since this is going to print out number values, let's go ahead and format the data. So I'm going to select this alt tag, and I come up here and click Format. So just like Excel, we can click on Currency. We want 2 decimal places for the sales amount. Yes, negative numbers is fine. Okay, now that we have our formatting set up the way we want, I'm going to apply this, close it, and let's also bold this grand total amount. To make sure we bold this whole alt tag, this whole sales amount, I'm going to come up here and click on the select tag so I can make sure I'm selecting this whole tag. Now I'm going to come over here. Let's go ahead and bold it. Okay, let's generate output so we can see what this looks like now. Yes, to save. So here's our table now with our extra row. Since we added our N for each tag within the table, it's giving us this blank row, but we utilize that blank row by adding the grand total for the sales amount right here. So great example for showing you how to conditionally format the text for certain values with this red text, and also adding a sum function, one of the many functions within our equation editor that you can utilize. All right, let's go back to Auto Tag Manager tab and click on the samples. Okay, now I want to show you conditionally formatting using the if tags and switch case tags. So I want to open the if tag tutorial, which is this one right here, first row, 5th column. So this will give us step-by-step instructions on how to utilize the if tag. We're going to look at this first example here, this if out and if end if tag. Now, the if tag is perfect when you want to show or hide specific elements within your template based on some condition within your data. So let's go ahead and select this first if tag right now. And this is going to evaluate what's within this. And if this evaluation returns true, then we're going to display everything between this beginning and ending if tag right now with the alt tag. If it evaluates to false, then we're going to skip over this alt tag, and everything in between this if and ending if tag, we're going to skip if this if evaluates to false and display everything after the ending if tag. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at this beginning if tag and see the data that we're actually evaluating here. So if it's selected, I'm going to click on the preview button within the auto tag tab. So in this if tag, we're just evaluating if 1 is less than 2. This is a simple equation, and since 1 is less than 2, it's going to return true. So this means that we're going to display this alt tag right here. If it was false, it would have skipped over this alt tag and gone on to the next thing. Now let's look at this alt tag and see what it's actually going to display since this if tag is true. I select it, click output, preview, and here we're just displaying text 1 is less than 2. Okay, now let's go ahead and take a look at the output. All right, so here we are just displaying the simple text right here. 1 is less than 2. Because it evaluates the true here. Now let's look at this next example right here with the if and else. And so our output is indicating that 3 is less than or equal to 4. Let me show you why this is showing. So I'm going to preview this if tag. And all we're doing here is evaluating if 3 is greater than 4. Of course, 3 is not greater than 4, so it's going to evaluate to false. Since this first if tag is evaluating to false, Report Designer is going to skip over this first alt tag and move on to what comes after the else tag. And it will provide everything that's after this else tag to the ending if tag. Right now, this is just a simple alt tag, but it could show or hide tables, text, any information you want, any size. So if we were to preview this alt tag, what is it returning? So since this if tag evaluates to false, this alt tag will display, and all it's going to do is display 3 is less than or equal to 4, which is exactly what we see in the output right here. So if this first if tag was to evaluate to true, what would this alt tag show? Let's preview it, and it would show that 3 is greater than 4. Okay, that's the if tag, and you'll want to use the if tag if you have 1 or 2 conditions or choices that you want to evaluate. But if you have 3 or more conditions that you would want to evaluate to, you could use nested if tags, like you see right here, where we have an if tag, an alt tag, the else, and then here's nested if with another if tag, out, else, out, end if, and this end if refers to this nested if, and then we have a final end if, which relates to this beginning if tag. So you could use nested if tags if you need to do 3 or more conditions, but we actually suggest using switch case tags. And I just noticed the time, we're running a little late. Sorry, felt that at the beginning. Having to go back and show you a few things, but we have a couple more things to show you. Won't take that much longer, so I hope you stay with me. So next thing we're going to be discussing is the switch case tags, and again, these tags we suggest when you want to evaluate 3 or more conditions. So let's go ahead and take a look at our switch case tag sample. And let's see. Okay, there's a couple of switch tags that we have. We have the switch tag and the switch tag 2. I'm going to go ahead and open this second one right now. So here we have another table containing some customer information, display information about customers. Here we have our customer for each tag. I'm going to preview it to see what it's returning. And here we're getting the customer IDs, first name, middle names, bunch of different information relating to the customer. And then we're going to be displaying the first name, the last name, the address, city, state, postal code, all throughout tags. And then there's this country column. And this is where we have added our switch tags. And all a switch tag does is it just tells Report Designer when to start evaluating case tags. So here's our switch tags right here. Here's our beginning switch tag, our ending switch tag. And next to the switch tags is our case tags. And this first case tag is going to be evaluating the country. It is checking if the country belongs to Canada. If it does, display the Canadian flag. Let's go ahead and double click on the Canada case tag to actually see what's being evaluated here. And so we have our equal sign. We have var name 1, and that just refers to the customer loop right here. And we want to look at the country region name from our customer's loop, and we're checking to see if that equals Canada. And if it equals Canada, then we want to display the Canadian flag. Then, if it doesn't find it, it will look at the next one and see, is the country region name United States? If it is, display the American flag. And we'll do this for the rest of the case tags that we're evaluating here for Mexico and Australia. And as soon as one of these conditions are met, one of these country region names equal Canada, USA, Mexico, Australia, Report Designer is going to display the flag and then exit the switch. It will then move on to the next item, which is this ending for each tag, and loop through again, displaying all these alt tags. And then in the country column, it's going to check if it's the country region name is Canada. If it does, Canadian flag. If not, it'll look for US, United States. Once it finds the country region name that matches, it'll display the flag and exit out of the switch tags, and then repeat the process for the next record and so on. Let's go ahead and take a look at this output to see what it's going to show. And here we see our first record in the list, which is John Yang, and having a country of flag of just Australia. If we scroll down further, we can see Lauren Walker, who is from Washington state in the United States, and so we display the American flag. And we can scroll down, see some Canadian flags, and so on. So here, we're evaluating 4 case tags. So there's 4 questions or conditions that we're asking to show or hide certain values based on the customer's country. And right now, we're just showing or hiding this flag image for each record. All right, that's the switch tag. And one more tag I wanted to show you about real quick is the import tag. I'll close that and go back to our samples. And let's go ahead and look at import tag. And we have a couple of different import tags. We have import tags for HTML, import tags for images, and here's just an import tag that covers all. Excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and select this one right here. So from this sample right here, it looks like we're importing an image file we're importing a PDF file, we're importing another template of doc type, we're importing some text file, and we're going to import an HTML page. Let's just go ahead and take a look at the output. All right. So first thing I want to point out is what you see in this template here, right here. This is just an image preview. This is actually a tag. We didn't just stick an image here. We are importing an image. So if I was to double click on this image, you'll see that it opens up our tag editor for the import tag. And here is our path to that image that we're displaying. So we're just showing you the preview here in the template so you can see the image size and layout before you generate the output. One last thing I want to point out on this import sample template is that you may notice over here, there is no content for the PDF output. We have content for the DOCX. We have content for importing a text file. We have content for importing an HTML page. So we have all this content right here being displayed, but not the PDF. And the only way you can actually import PDF is to output to PDF. So since we outputted to a DOCX, we're not going to import the PDF here. But if we were to generate PDF output, say yes to save. And here you can see importing a PDF file, and here is the file. We didn't have this before. This was blank on the DOCX output, but if you want to input PDF into your template, then the output must be PDF. Okay, let's just go back to the slides for a moment just to make sure I didn't miss anything. So I showed you the if tag and how it evaluates when it's true, and that it shows everything between the beginning and ending if tags. If you have multiple evaluations or conditions that you're trying to check against, for instance, 3 or more, you'll want to use the switch case tag. And you may want to take a screenshot of this slide while we're on it. Here are some resources that you can utilize. If you want to look up anything from our knowledge base, you can do that at wiki.windward.net. This is our old wiki. We have a new wiki that we've published. It has quite a bit of the old documentation. It doesn't have everything yet. We are going to continue building it. But if you do want to see our new knowledge base, you can reach out at that at ohana.windwardstudios.com. If you want to retrieve your license keys, you can do that at store.windward.net. We have a user center that you can access to windwardstudios.com/user-support.center. And that's like a main page for all things that you could need support for. You can submit a ticket, you can look at demos, you can register for webinars. It's just a central place to access different resources for support. If you can't find what you're looking for in the wiki, you can always reach out to our amazing support team at support.windwardstudios.com. Or you could also email them at support@windwardstudios.com. So if you have a question that you can't find an answer to, go ahead and contact the support team. And if you want any changes or have any feature requests that you want added to the engine or report designer, you can do this at ideas.windward.net. All right. So there's going to be a survey at the end of this webinar. Please feel free to fill it out truthfully. Any feedback that you can provide will help me and the attendees with the next webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and see if there was any questions and answer them for you. There is one question that was asked. Can you use the equation editor to set up a query with two equations or functions used? You can't use the equation editor to do that like that, but you can use the equation editor to get an idea of the setup of the function. The equation editor just lets you use one. Let's go back to an example for a moment. All right. So let's say, here's an example right here. We have, well, data is a function, but not a great one. So let's go ahead and just remove this for a moment. There was a ticket I helped with somebody where they needed to concatenate two pieces of two bits of data from the XML file and then convert that into a URL encoded value. So they weren't sure how to do that. So I had them coming here, find the concatenation function, and then set this up with the two fields that they want to concatenate together. So let's go ahead and do sales amount. Okay, and we want to concatenate that with the salesperson. Okay, so with this setup, had them click OK. And so here, right now, we have our first equation. Concat, then it's going to concat the sales amount with the salesperson. So with that first part set up, I had them save that off. Then I had them come back in here. And the next function that they wanted to use was the URL encode. So then I had them come over here and choose that, enter in a value so they could see the setup. Click OK. And now that shows us how the URL encode is set up. Then I had them take their concatenation query and add it into the URL and encode. So you can't use the equation editor to create a query that has multiple functions, but you can use it as a guide to understand how to set up the function for the different functions that you're using. Concatenate, how you have to pass in two variables, comma separated, and how URL encode just only requires one query. So good question. You can use the equation editor as a guide. Okay, that was the only question that was brought up. So good one, thank you. So, well, I want to say thank you all for joining today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye now.